this work? I'm so insecure about all things technological. So, well, good morning and thank you again.
You have to speak into
I
the.
have to see. I knew I needed to eat it.
There.
So,
Take it out.
There you go.
Now put it up.
I need so much help. Okay, so are we good now?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to keep it at the same.
It's not that loud. Can you turn it off?
No.
You go in and out.
These
You need
are
to
really
sit
interesting
close.
questions for which I have no answer to.
That's good.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming back. I'm so relieved that Wagner didn't scare any of us away. And we have some wonderful music to listen to today. I hope some things to think about as we're listening to this music. We're going to take a little trip to one particular opera, Tristan and Isolde. And we're going to Tristan and Isolde for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's in the Met season, in the Met repertoire next season, and will be one of those HD performances. So if anybody gets fired up today, you can look forward to actually seeing a performance of this. There's a Norwegian soprano who's making the rounds, and she's making a huge splash. So the opera world is very excited about Tristan and her. So, end of pause. We are going to talk about Tristan, but in order to do that, we need to talk a little bit about the musical language that Wagner uses. I claimed last time, if you remember, that Wagner had a hand in changing the course of music history, and we're going to look at what that means and how that happened today. As we're going to hear from Joe, who's going to talk about the story and the philosophy behind the story a bit, we will learn that Tristan and Isolde is not just or maybe not even at all, a love story. It is got many layers, which Joe is going to explain to us. But one of the threads of the piece is that it is not about culmination as much as it is yearning, striving, trying to get somewhere, hoping. Without giving a spoiler alert, it doesn't end well for anybody on the stage. So they strive a lot, and unfortunately it doesn't come to a happy solution. Or resolution, I should say. So, Wagner needed a language, a musical language. Here's the point. Wagner needed a musical language that takes music in a new direction. Why? So that he can show that these characters are trying to achieve something, trying to reach some place. And the striving and the energy that they spend trying to get to this plateau is called for a new language. So we're going to start by playing a little musical game this morning. I hope your wits are sharp. So I'm going to play a little excerpt and ask you a question afterwards. I hear people humming, which is, of course, you're playing along so beautifully. That is not the end of that opening. It goes somewhere. Can you remember where it goes? Can you sing for me? So the question is, how did you know that? How do you know where that piece is going to go?
We've heard it.
You've heard it. Right. It's like I put a plant in here. She knows, everybody knows that piece, so you know where it's going to go. Okay, so let's try this piece, which you may not know. I'm gonna have to go.
Tough crowd.
If you didn't know that piece, I bet you would still have been able to sing.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is it in the music that takes you there? Well, there's one determining relationship in Western music up until the 1970s that sort of helps us feel that directionality. In music, we call that tonality. So tonal center, we have to get there to be resolved, happy, fulfilled. And the way we get there is that note that I left hanging. Let's listen to it one more time. So these two notes, we all know it.
Yes.
Because we all speak that language. It's a language that we all speak. We understand the rules. We understand the grammars, whatever. So that note, that penultimate note, is as close to the final note as we can get in Western music. It's the smallest interval. Bum, bum, half step. Now they're experimenting with quarter tones, which is unnerving to say the least, and takes us into it. We're not doing that today. All right, so Wagner said, okay, if we have that half step, bum, bum, that everybody knows, everybody speaks, everybody gets, maybe if I'm trying to create music that is not definitive in its resolution, is this making sense to you?
Yes.
We are going to use a lot of those half steps. And they're not necessarily going to go where everybody thinks they know they should. So I'm just going to play the Tristan chord. I've been waiting to do this all morning. The Tristan chord, and then Joe is going to take over with the story, and then we're going to see how it applies to the opera. The opera begins this way. What's that? But there's worse. Now you have it in your paper, a little schematic of the chord. If you don't read music, don't worry about it. I just thought, it might be a little hint. And you can see, maybe you can see that the top line just sort of creeps up. Everything is slithering around. It's like it's looking for some kind of resolution. It's one more time.
It's on the bottom.
It's all right. These are all half steps. So if you don't have one half step that is determinate, you have nothing but half steps. It's like, where are we? And that's exactly what Wagner was trying to accomplish. Why? What's in the story that makes him want us to be uncertain about where we're headed, unmoored, as it were, with the story? How's that for a cue line? Look at that.
Okay, I've been promoted from disc jockey. So now my job is to summarize a 5-hour opera in about 5 minutes. So anyway, you have a list of the cast of characters there, so that might help a little bit. The first act begins on a ship. Right? The ship is bound from Ireland to England, and Isolde and her maid Brangena are on the ship. And why are they on the ship? Well, they're on the ship because she is being brought against her will to be married to King Mark of Cornwall. So she is basically pretty angry and spends the entire first act raging, pretty much. Especially in a long passage which has been known as the narrative and curse, which goes on for a few minutes. So in this passage, what we learn is that her betrothed had been killed by Tristan, who had come to Ireland to collect taxes. But in the process, he had also been wounded. But his friends brought him to Isolde under disguise and under an assumed name, because she was known to be a great healer, to have healing powers. So they bring Tristan under an assumed name and in disguise to Isolde, who proceeds to tend to him, but then discovers, in fact, that he is, in fact, Tristan and the murderer of her beloved. So she resolves she's going to try to kill him, but mysteriously her hand is stayed, and she feels pity, so she lets him go. He returns to England and makes these marriage arrangements, which only infuriates her more because she feels completely betrayed. So she hates him basically and wants him dead. So she tells Brangena that she's brought along with her a potion, a death potion. So she tells Brangena, go and kind of put it together, get the cups ready, and I'm going to get Tristan to come over, and we're both going to drink this potion, so we'll both die. There's no point in, her living, because once Tristan's gone, she's toast anyway, so she might as well, die with him. Okay, so this is exactly what happens. Tristan comes over, she presents him this cup, ostensibly a kind of cup of reconciliation, and they both drink this cup, but they don't die. Why? Because Brangena, unbeknownst to Isolde, has substituted a love potion, the death potion. So instead, they fall immediately, madly, passionately, obsessively in love. And that brings us to the end of the first act. The second act is basically a little bit of preparatory music, but the second act is basically a very, very long duet between Tristan and Isolde. A love duet of sorts, but if you read the words, they're kind of oddly philosophical, not so much passionate. But in the music is building and building and building, and over the course of the duet, which goes on for at least half an hour, goes on and on and builds passionately and passionately, almost reaching the climax, but doesn't, because King Mark arrives and discovers them in flagrante delicto, and that's not good for any of them. So a fight ensues between Tristan and Melot, one of Mark's knights. Tristan is wounded, and Isolde and Brangena escape in the chaos. So that's how the second act works. Third act, again, Pro-U begins the act. Tristan's friend Courvenal has brought Tristan to his castle to recover, die, whatever, thinking that perhaps Isolde could be summoned to come and heal him once again. So the third act, there is this very, very long section, and I have to admit, somewhat tedious, which goes on for about 40 minutes, where Tristan is raving and hallucinating that he sees Isolde and, dying and going into oblivion and all this stuff. Anyway, it's this Tristan raving. But when Isolde finally arrives, it's too late. She dies in his arms. Meanwhile, he dies. He dies in her arms, sorry. Meanwhile, Mark and Melot are on their way to the castle. Now, Mark is intending, actually, to pardon them because Brangena had revealed to him what had actually happened. But Courvenal does not know this. Courvenal thinks they're coming to kill them. So Courvenal attacks Melot, kills him, but then he himself is killed by one of the king's soldiers. So, it's kind of like the end of Hamlet, where everybody is dying at the end. Basically, this is what's happening. Isolde has been oblivious to all this, completely focused on the dead Tristan. The opera ends with her famous aria, the Liebestod, which you'll hear in a few minutes, in which she sees a vision of Tristan and talks about entering oblivion, and at the end, she just expires on his body. So you'll be hearing the Liebestod in a few minutes. So that's Tristan and Isolde. So the story is a tragic one. It's a tragic story. Two lovers die at the end, one from a physical wound and one from grief. There's no happy reunion and salvation, in the form of Isolde's curative powers. She gets there too late. Mark gets there too late. It's too late to save them. So this is the literal level of the story. And the opera can certainly be appreciated at that level. But the opera is also a tragedy on a much larger scale. It's a tragedy not just of these two people. It is a tragedy of the human condition itself. Wagner had become a devotee of the philosophy of Schopenhauer and had also been dabbling in Buddhism. And I'm certainly far from being a philosopher, and I'm certainly not an expert on Schopenhauer, but Schopenhauer and Buddhism do share a common theme. The culprit of all human suffering is desire itself. And the relentless state of unfulfilled longing is the tragedy of the human condition. And I'd just like to read you a short quote from this book, The Tristan Court, that kind of illustrates that a bit. A belief that is near the center both of Buddhism and Schopenhauer's thought is that life consists of endless willing, trying, hoping, striving, grasping, yearning. We are all the time, from our earliest babyhood onwards, wanting something, reaching out for something. And what is more, this endless willing is inherently unsatisfiable, because the moment a wish is gratified, another one takes its place. And because adversity, misfortune, accident, illness, disappointment, frustration, and failure are common human experiences which no one can expect never to encounter, and because in the end, even the luckiest in life are doomed, inevitably, to be overwhelmed and obliterated by death, so their luck is only temporary, and because of that, delusory. Life is unavoidably tragic. So, I think an argument could be made that in spite of its romantic story, Tristan and Isolde is the most tragic of Wagner's operas. There is no redemption. There's redemption in Tannhäuser, there's redemption in Lohengrin, there's redemption in Flying Dutchman, there's redemption in The Rain, but not in Tristan, notwithstanding that some directors like to portray this as the lovers being reunited after death. Well, that's a nice little add-on, and it probably makes the viewers, the audience feel good, but that's not in the music, and that's not in the words. In the Liebestod, what Isolde sings about is finally being released from her unfulfilled longing and desire by dissolving into oblivion. There's nothing about reunion with Tristan. So these directors who are kind of impose that on the end, well, I guess that's a fine way if people like to see that, and I guess people do like to see that. But unlike these other Wagnerian operas, there is literally no redemption at the end of Tristan. So ironically, his most romantic story is also the most tragic. So, Jim will now pick up, talk about this theme of unfulfilled longing as it's expressed through music.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the philosophy part away from me. That was very kind of you. So you can tell in the story that all of that unfulfilled longing has a musical language that is perfectly suited for it. A music without resolution. So we're going to turn to the music now and listen to a little bit of that prelude. I just want to say one thing about that Tristan chord. I'm going to say a lot about the Tristan chord, but one thing right now, which is that it appears, as Joe alluded, several times in the opera. It appears at very pivotal moments, very dramatic moments. It never resolves. Never. Until the final, 2 minutes. So after 5 hours of unresolved, half steps moving God knows where, finally we get some kind of resolution. But as Joe said, the nature of that resolution is very much up for grabs. And when we look in detail, you have the text of the Liebestod, so we're going to look at a few lines there. When we get to the music, and you follow along, then we will talk about what that text is leading us to. All right, so the opera begins with a very famous prelude. Unfortunately, the prelude is like so much of Wagner, is lengthy. And we don't have time to listen to the, it's 12 minutes long, and that's the prelude. And we don't have time to listen to the whole prelude, but we do need to hear the very beginning. And then I want to say something about a little bit later on in the prelude. It drove audiences in the 19th century absolutely mad. In both senses, some people were, bowled over by it, and others were revolted and repulsed by it. I think I read a quote last week. I don't know if you remember, about somebody saying that the prelude reminds them of a medieval painting, where you remember this, where the martyr is on a rack and his intestines are slowly being. So there were mixed feelings about the prelude. But did you notice those half steps? I mean, they come one after the other, and then we think we get. I don't mean to be too technical here, but I think it's important. There is one moment just in that little excerpt where we think, there's a final chord coming, but let's listen to what happens.
We hear this. Wagner, and we hear it. We think, okay, he's repeated that, so maybe that's going to be the chord resolution that we've been waiting for. But then we get this. We all know where we think that's going to go, but no. So the biggest climax in
those first few minutes is what we call a deceptive cadence in music, because it has deceived us. And he's not ready to take us to the end. The climax of the prelude contains that Tristan chord, double forte, but again it doesn't resolve. And then, at the very end of the prelude, at the very end, Wagner has one masterstroke in his quiver. Listen to how he ends the prelude.
What kind of ending is that? I mean, but A+ for anybody who noticed. What is that? It's the chord. Yeah, it's the chord. It's not played. It's not.
You suggested it.
This is so humiliating. It's not played as a chord. It's played as single notes, but it's there. So Wagner embeds that chord throughout the piece. Again, sort of setting us up for expectation, but not resolution. All right, so he begins with that Tristan chord. Just one quick comparison. Verdi, his exact contemporary, born in the same year, wrote an opera right around the same time, 1 year apart. And this is how it's called Forza del Destino. It's a fabulous opera. But here's how Verdi begins this opera. Now, there is no ambiguity about that, right? I mean, he gives it to us. We know where we belong. Verdi, 1862. Wagner, 1861. We're on the cusp in music history of something really good. All right, again, I wish we could do more with the prelude because it was spectacular, but we need to turn to the final moments of the opera. I also wish we could do some of the duet, because as they sing about their desire for night being swallowed up in oblivion and all of that, there's a climax, and as Joe said, the climax is when Mark comes in and they're discovered and guess the chord that we hear, triple forte in the orchestra when they come in. It's the Tristan chord. So even though you might think that this is an opera that has no method to its madness, there's a lot of method. I'll leave the madness for you guys to decide. All right, we need to turn to the Liebestod. And I'm glad that we have time because I do want to play this entire excerpt. The Liebestod, as Joe said, is when Isolde is looking at the dead body of Tristan, and she sings this aria to wrap up the opera. But let's look at the text. Let's look at the text. You all have a copy of the text? Softly and gently see him smiling, how the eyes that open fondly see it, don't you see? I mean, already we get the sense of, you know, are you, does everybody have a copy? Okay. It's on the back.
It's on the back of the back.
Wagner, thank you for
Turn it
asking
over.
that question. The answer is yes. Wagner's vision of the total artwork included the fact that he wanted control over everything, the text as well as the music. So he wrote this text. He wrote all his texts. Nobody's accused him of being a great librettist or poet, but he went ahead anyway. But I want to concentrate on the last few lines. You see where it starts, shall I sip them, plunge beneath them? All right, she's talking about, actually we should back up a little bit. Ever clear wafting round me are the waves of gentle breezes. Waves is important, waves. Listen to the music when we get there. Are they clouds of gladdening sweet fragrance as they swell and murmur around me? I mean, we get this idea of her being swallowed up, her being immersed, her being diving into these waves. Shall I sip them, plunge beneath them, breathe my last amid their sweet smell and the billowy surge? This is in the English version, of course, so you have to make some allowances for translation. In the gush of sound, I hate that translation. In the world's spirit's infinite all. Infinite all. The German there, in the world's spirit is the Weltatems, Weltatems, which is really the world's breath. So there's this image of her just being subsumed into this cosmic, whatever is cosmic. The world's spirit, infinite all to drown, sinking, unconscious, void of all thought. This is total surrender to what? Nothingness, right? And then what does she say? Highest desire. All of this sinking and drowning and subsuming and nothingness is her highest desire. Höchste Lust. So beautiful. In des Weltatems wehenden Aal ertrinken, versinken, unbewusst. Höchste Lust. And then she dies. And at the end of the episode, guess what we hear? Automatic A for the day for anybody who guessed the answer. I have to find the page here. You can see that it's. Where shall I start? For it? 5 hours we've been waiting. And boy, does it feel good when we get there. All right, let's listen to the Liebe stuff. Settle in, because it's not a short excerpt, and we're going to prepare to feel the emotions of these waves as she just enters into this state of höchste Lust.
interested in singers in before. It's Helga Jernisch and Herbert von Karajan as the conductor.
most beautiful B major chords ever. Ever. Did you notice the lead in, all of that surging dee da dee dee da 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 dee da, those waves climbing, and that orgasmic climax is just an astonishing feature of this remarkable work. So I guess I don't want to speak for Joe, but I'm going to anyway. The question that we posed was Wagner's use and monster. I know it sounds like a cop-out. I think he was both. I think he was a bigoted, anti-Semitic. I don't think. He was a bigoted, anti-Semitic, manipulative, ego-driven, horrible human being who wrote some of the most gorgeous music ever, I think. So, if we need an answer to that question, I don't have it for you, but we do have the music. So, thank you so much for paying attention and being here. It means a lot to us. Joe has a... Yeah. Are there questions before we go? Thank you. Are there questions? Yes.
Where does Tristan occur in his list of operas? Is it late?
No.
It was written in 1859. It was finished in 1859, but not produced until 1861. And the Ring Cycle was first produced in 1876. Now, the Ring Cycle took 25 years for him to write. So he had started the Ring, he interrupted and came to Tristan and Meistersinger, and then came back to the Ring. So it depends on how you count, but it is not the latest work. That's Parsifal. This is the last opera.
I find it interesting that he bookends this opera with two magnificent ethereal pieces, and it's the human voice that leads us out of the opera at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
How do the actors and players, they could get caught up in it themselves. How do they have the stamina to go through 5 hours of this?
You have to ask them, but we ask ourselves that question every time we see one of these pieces. I mean, but I was saying earlier to some folks in the front here that Isolde is on stage for pretty near the entire opera, not the last act. She does get to get herself together for the legal stuff, but she's on stage, and that duet is a killer. Joe said it's long. I timed it. It's 45 minutes of two people singing against a rather large orchestra. So stamina is an incredible demand for these singers. Not to mention memorizing all this text, which does not repeat in the Italian style where you have verses and you have stanzas and that kind of thing. This is something he called durchkomponiert, which is through composed, which means each line is in response to the text, which to me seems much more difficult to memorize because you're really memorizing a whole book, a poem. And as I said, the orchestra is larger than was the norm, so they have to produce a lot of sound to override, not override, but to ride over the orchestra. I want to come back to John's comment because that's, in Italian opera, that is not an uncommon convention is that the operas, as you know, the operas end with a soprano, usually a soprano solo that can show all kinds of display and virtuosity. But it was unusual in German opera. It was very unusual. So for her to summarize this entire piece, the weight of the argument is really on her at the end.
Just on the issue of stamina, I don't know if anyone had the opportunity to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra Tristan and Isolde about a month ago, a little more than that. And Nina Stammer sung Isolde in her 60s. And it was incredible. I mean, first of all, it was incredibly sung, but the stamina that this woman was able to manifest throughout that evening was just incredible.
I'm curious about Wagner's sources for the legend, for all of his work, actually. But you know, Tristan and Isolde goes back to the Middle Ages, and of course, with his interest in mythology, he wanted those more ancient texts. But do you know anything about where he got this particular version of the story?
Joe, you have the mic.
Pathetically little. It's a French text, French medieval text, Tristan, and I think I'm right in saying that it is a much more traditional love story. Eloise and Abelard kind of, separated by circumstance and all of that. But again, Wagner being the single-minded guy that he was, saw an opportunity to transform pieces into his own vision. And so it suited his purposes to make it into this other story. The Ring is a compilation, as we know, of a medieval poem and Norse Eddas, and he kind of conflated those. So he took source material and then refashioned it for his own purposes. But other than that, I'm sorry, I can't be of any more use to you. Sorry. I can direct you to some literature.
Sure, I could find it. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Well, again, thank you so much for letting Joe and me come and share this.
For Bellini and Bel Canto.
Oh, yeah. Shameless plug.
Say that again, Joe. Repeat.
Bellini and Bel Canto in October.